Good afternoon, everybody. As soon as Eric Schmidt sits down, we'll start our panel.
I'm coming.
Couldn't find you. There you were in the back of the room. Welcome, Eric. Good afternoon. My name is Adam Lashinsky with Fortune Magazine in California. And our panel discussion today is Technology for Society. We have an extraordinary group of business and political and nonprofit leaders. And we'll try to take the conversation to a lofty level, and we'll also try to get into some nitty-gritty issues as well. And there will be time for Q&A, so please think about the questions that you have. I'll start by introducing the entire and large panel, and then I'll ask a question to each of the panelists to kick things off, and then we'll have a conversation. And I like to say that at any point, if somebody in the audience feels that they absolutely must get into the conversation immediately, then please stand up and shout and raise your hands, and we'll get into the conversation immediately. To my far left is Rainer Brüderle, and I apologize if I didn't say that well.
Perfect.
Thank you. My German is not very strong. He is the Federal Minister of Economics and Technology of Germany. He's a member of Parliament and the Vice Chair of his party. Seated next to him is William Green, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Accenture. Next is Joel Selanikio, and I got that right, Joel?
My Greek's not very good. I think you got it right.
He's the director of DataDyne, and DataDyne, I'm going to guess, is the least known organization on the panel, and I'm going to give him an opportunity to explain in a little bit what it is. Mike Laphen is the Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of CSC, which stands for Computer Sciences Corporation, an IT consulting company. Fair?
Full service IT services.
IT services company. Thank you. Eric Schmidt, the Chairman of the Executive Committee and Chief Executive Officer of a company you might have heard of called Google. And we should point out that Eric is the co-chair of the World Economic Forum Annual Meeting 2010. And then lastly, seated next to me is Didier Lombard, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of France Telecom. So welcome to all of you. I think I'll just start in the order that I introduced you, and I'll start with you, Minister Brüderle. Last month, you gave a speech, and you made the statement that IT can make major contributions to, quote, solving the main challenges of the 21st century. And you highlighted environmental protection and efficiency. So could you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, we make yearly summits with our IT companies working in Germany and introduce in the dialogue business companies new strategies, and one is Green IT. With the help of IT possibilities to get more efficient solutions and measurements of environmental problems. And in this cooperation, I think we get more efficiencies in the energy sectors, in the efficiency of our machines and other sectors. And so it's a base like inventing the electro machine in the history, replacing the Dampf machine, the steam machine. And so it's a new dimension of productivity in all sectors, and also in the green sector. And we emphasize as a special sector for our export industries and for solving our problems, these cooperations of the green industries with the IT possibilities.
Minister, we think of Germany as having a rich technological history, but I gather from statements that you made that Germany isn't where you think it should be in some areas of technology. Could you explain what you mean by that? What is in your needs to improve category in Germany?
we want to speed up in this development and to get all people in the country as part of it. So our strategy is that up to 2014, every German has 50 megabyte possibilities in the computer sector. And with these possibilities, all the companies, green or not green, have infrastructure, information infrastructure, which gives them possibilities in corporations, in cloud computing, and all these new assets we have. That's productivity all over.
And I'm sorry, on the 2014 goal, where are you now?
This year we have every person has 1 megabyte, every person in Germany, and of course some have more. High-speed internet is the centers. In my hometown Mainz, I have high-speed internet for years. But we want to have it for every person, every place in Germany, to have equal chances in every corner of Germany.
Good, thank you. Bill Green, your business is helping your customers make money with technology, or save money, or be more productive. But our charge today is to discuss how technology can, for lack of a better expression, make the world a better place. How will you do that?
Well, I think we're at a defining moment right now if you sit back and look at it, because as we've all sort of looked at what's been going on in the world for the last 12 or 24 months, we realize all the things that don't work, and we realize all the things we need to make work. And what the technology industry is filled with visionaries, and the problem with visionaries is they confuse tomorrow with 10 years from tomorrow. But that 10 years from tomorrow is actually here now. The technologies that have been innovated in the last 24 months are profound. And what we have to do is reinvent the delivery systems of the globe. And whether you're talking education, healthcare, social services, if you just take education for a minute, how are you going to educate 375 million people in India under the age of 17? You're not going to do it with our traditional model. But if you look at the developed market at the United States, we have tremendous issues in our education system because of access, affordability, and accountability. And the way to crack the code on that is we need to reinvent the delivery systems. And I believe technology has finally arrived for us to start doing that in a more cost-effective way. And I think we will first solve the problems in a bold and decisive way in the emerging markets, and then be able to retrofit some of those ideas and technologies back to the developed markets.
So what's an example? What's a delivery system?
Well, an example is, for instance, we have all this discussion about how do you teach people math and science, right? And we have a lot of things about we need faculty the right way. The other thing we learn though is that if you ask a young person in the United States, do you want to take science? They'll say no. And if you say what's your favorite TV show, they'll say CSI. And if you say, do you want to be a CSI? They'll say yes. And all of a sudden you're teaching them horizontally as opposed to vertically. And you can take that and you can enable it, leveraging the cloud, leveraging the network, and leveraging handheld devices that are low cost, highly efficient, to change how you deliver knowledge to young people.
And I don't think we should ignore commerce on this panel. Is what you're talking about an opportunity for Accenture?
Well, I think it's an opportunity for every company. I mean, we've had a little pause. The thing that hasn't paused is the R&D around technology. The R&D around technology didn't miss a beat over the last couple of years, but adoption paused a little bit. But I think as we get more wind behind us, as opposed to at our nose, we're going to see people reaching out. We have to change the delivery models in industry as well. When we think about what it takes to compete in the markets of the future, not the markets of today, we look at a market like India and say we're going to have to deliver at least 50% of the functionality at 10% of the cost. You are not going to do that with the current paradigm and delivery system we have now. You're going to leverage some of the technologies like our guest next to me has pioneered.
Great. So thank you for that, for supplying me with that segue. So
My
Joel,
pleasure.
your organization uses technology to make the world a better place. Could you explain?
Well, thanks for that introduction, Adam. DataDyne, I'm a public health doctor. I've worked for about 20 years in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia. And I now head up a company called DataDyne, and we use mobile phones and the web to try and develop software to help public health and to help international development. And from our perspective, I think, as you're just talking about infrastructure and as we move forward, it's been an incredible time to watch over the last 10 years in places like sub-Saharan Africa, because for the first time we have an IT infrastructure. We're in a place where since the radio, nothing sustained, nothing scaled. And now you have a situation where quite literally at the district level or above in the poorest countries in the world, every single health worker is walking around with a pocket computer that is connected to the network. And so I think we've seen tremendous gains. For about 20 years I've been hearing doctors talk about telemedicine. And usually telemedicine meant really expensive, full-time, high-definition video connections from one doctor in one clinic to another doctor across continents. That stuff never scaled and it never sustained, not even really in the United States very much. In developing countries, we now have telemedicine, and telemedicine consists of the ability to call a colleague in another city and ask their opinion about the case that you're seeing. And I think the lesson there is the things that have really made a difference in the places where I work are the things that, as you point out, are low-cost devices, things that are easy, that are simple enough for people to configure themselves, not the complex solutions. So it's really been it's a really optimistic time. On the other hand, I think there's a great deal more that we can do that we're not doing, because I think now a lot of technology folks are looking at things like the iPhone, the Android platform, which are very exciting, and I love my iPhone. But in sub-Saharan Africa, it's going to be a long time before every school teacher, for example, has something like an iPhone or an Android phone. On the other hand, every one of those school teachers right now has a mobile phone. And I think right now the only things we're really doing with that is making calls and sending text messages. There's a lot more we can do.
Well, will it be a long time before everyone in sub-Saharan Africa has some sort of smartphone that can run applications?
Well, I think they have phones right now that will run applications. I mean, you can build applications, and in fact, we write some of those applications. But I think wondering about when they're going to get smartphones leads us to think, well, we'll just wait until they get smartphones. Now, I'm not I can't predict the future. But what I can tell you is that right now, as I said, every single health worker, basically, almost every single health worker in sub-Saharan Africa is walking around with a mobile phone. Now, those are doctors in clinics, those are nurses, other people who are managing supply chains. They have no books. They have no continuing medical education. They have nothing. They don't know what the drug doses are unless it's something they use every day. And there's absolutely no reason why we can't deliver that information to them by SMS today. So.
Yeah, and before we move on, one of our charges is to discuss how to use existing technologies for new applications. So I'd like you to talk about what you do with SMS messages in Chile.
Sure. Well, in Chile we have a project that's, and I hate the word pilot, because typically in international development we do pilots and the pilots never become anything else. But of course you have to start somewhere. So in Chile we have a program that allows the Ministry of Agriculture to send information to rural farmers via SMS. Now the ministry has had its content, its information that it's wanted to share for years. And they've known that the farmers have had mobile phones for about 3 to 5 years. But they haven't had the software that allows them to connect their very simple content with a delivery system to reach those mobile phones. And so up until our project, they were driving in a truck to each of these rural farms. Now, of course, the ministry is paying for the SMSs that are going out in this pilot project, but they're saving a tremendous amount of money, not to mention time and effort, by not having to go out in a vehicle, and it's having a tremendous difference on the lives of these farmers. One of our staff was talking with a farmer who said, who thanked her during a training for the technology and said, we really appreciate this. I was going to plant my corn crop about a month ago, and I got a text message that morning that said there were going to be torrential rains the following week. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't get the weather report, and he's a farmer. He said, because I got that one text message, I didn't plant my crop. I waited, there were the rains the following week, and then I planted my crop. And of course, the rains would have washed my entire annual income away. One single text message. So I'm all for building iPhone applications. I think it's fantastic, but I also want to do things now that are going to save lives now.
Adam, I might just add an example because it's very consistent with that, and I know we want to get at real life examples. we work in Ethiopia with a group of nurses, 24,000 nurses. And to train 24,000 nurses would be about 100 man-years of traditional delivery system. How do you train them to do what they do? We leverage very simple technology, very simple laptops at the end. We can do that in 5 man-years to get the same level of competence, and we can do it in 25% of the time. And so that isn't about invention, that isn't about the next generation, it's not about 3G or 4G or next generation handsets, it's about here and now. Things that are available to use current technology that's already there and rethink the delivery system of how we're taking knowledge and getting it from where it is to where we need it.
And Joel, do you sell that software?
Well, it's been interesting because we were entirely grant supported until recently, and we're now trying to think of ways that we can have a sustainability model that isn't related to asking for grants every single year. And so, not being from the business side, it's actually been a revelation to me to spend a lot of time out in Silicon Valley, where of course everyone is obsessed with what their business model is. And so, for example, for our the Chile project, I don't think is ready to kind of be widely disseminated yet, but probably within a year. We have another project that allows people to collect form data, collect surveillance data, surveys on mobile phones, and that's actually that actually was turned on last summer. And the model we're using for that is usually called a freemium model, where we have the huge majority of users use the basic service, which is fantastic compared to nothing. Compared to the really expensive solutions that they would never have been able to afford. And then we have a small subset of users who are usually from very large organizations doing things like testing vaccines. So these are well-funded organizations, and we find that we hypothesize that we'll be able to get enough revenue from those organizations to actually pay for the distribution of that capacity, that really essential information capacity to essentially everyone else on Earth.
Mike, I know you're interested in healthcare. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I look kind of at the other end of what Joel is addressing. We're a global IT services company, and we're out trying to harness the technologies that we're talking about here at the forum, including cloud computing. And we think there's enormous opportunity here to do that. Particularly in the healthcare space, and we've been at work with that, and it's tying together the healthcare objectives, both the provider and the payer, as well as the privacy and the security issues that surround it, which are considerable, and kind of break it down into 3 tiers at the healthcare space. One at the, let's say, the regional level, and that's where we've been working with organizations like the state of Massachusetts, where we're trying to make insurance through the Massachusetts Exchange available to everybody in Massachusetts, which has become universal health care in Massachusetts. So here was an opportunity to put up a trusted cloud, but a cloud that has access to all the citizens in Massachusetts and is leveraging buying power for them. So they have the opportunity to do comparative pricing and take advantage of that. Moving another step, we work with the National Institute of Health, and they have also set up a trusted cloud, and this is for drug safety purposes. And here they are pulling in from many different collaborative sources, hospitals and others, insurance companies, and they're evaluating huge amounts of data to determine whether there's any patterns in there that would lead to significant drug safety issues. And again, that's pretty much a trusted cloud, and that's up running on Amazon.com. We work with them to architect that. And that's probably one of the areas that we're most busy in right now. That is architecting cloud domains. And by that I mean tying together the on-premise data with various variations of cloud, whether it be trusted, whether it be public, whether it be hybrid. And I think we're just going to see so much more of that going forward in the healthcare space as well as others.
So excuse me, one of your examples was a consumer example, correct? And the other, in Massachusetts, and the other was an organizational example. And the latter, presumably NIH has good computers and everyone has the computing that they need. I'm curious if internet access to the internet or even proficiency in using the internet is a barrier in the health insurance case that you raised?
Well, with the NHS case, actually, they're using Amazon's platform because of the scalability issue. What the issue they have there is some of the analysis and research and detailed exercises require a huge scaling and computing capacity. So they take advantage of that cloud environment to do that. I would just speak to one other tier within the healthcare space, and that is, again, we're involved with the NHS in UK, trying to transform that whole environment, and that goes from the ambulance all the way through to post-op patient care, and that's being accomplished both by portal access that was never there before, as well as digitalization of electronic healthcare as well as radiology. So I think we're just going to see a huge transformation here. I think it's just the beginning. And, you know, we were at the ICT governors meeting, and the conversation, we had the healthcare folks come in, the healthcare CEOs come in, and the discussions around sensors that's coming forward, I think is just amazing. Biometric sensors, both for chronic conditions and for preventive purposes. I think it's really going to be exciting for the future.
Great, thank you. So, Eric, if your company's whole mission almost is using existing technology in the form of the World Wide Web or the internet to improve people's lives in the form of getting in terms of getting information, would you just tick off a couple or three of the technologies that Google pursues that you think will do the most of the types of things that we're talking about?
I think one of the things to talk about is when we're here at Davos, we talk about all of these issues that everybody has. They were true 20 years ago or 40 years ago or 60 years ago in society. So the question is, what's different now? And I think in the examples that you heard so far, what is fundamentally different is that people have a powerful computer at their disposal. It may be limited because they got an earlier generation or they had to buy the cheap model or what have you. And furthermore, that powerful computer, also known as a mobile phone or equivalent, and everyone here has one, because most of you are, when you're bored in the sessions, you use them, right? You use them for resources and so forth.
No one's doing that while you're speaking.
I'm sure. Please welcome. We love parallel processing here. We do it at Google all the time. No one ever looks at me in meetings anymore. They're all typing. But my point here is you've got the thing that's new here is you've got this computer that's very powerful connected to the term we use is cloud-based services, which can do amazing reasoning. And it's true whether you go to the cheapest possible implementation to the most powerful implementation, that you can do things there that are magical. Examples of current magic are things called augmented reality, where basically you can have the computer look at where you are and add information. Take a picture of where you are and tell you what's going on to the degree it can discover it inside of a building, and with all the appropriate privacy and security issues. Now, what are some other examples of magic? Well, I've argued for a long time that the ability to use Google Maps and Google Earth at the level of resolution is in fact magical. Now, because of the Haiti crisis, we flew a low-level, with permission of course, a low-level airplane and took the highest resolution pictures of anywhere ever taken from the air and put them on the public web. And you can see those if you just use Google Earth and you enable that particular layer. So I feel like I can at least participate in the discussion, and we can, and many, many people are using this as a platform to really help people in an extraordinarily terrible situation. What's another example? Translation. We're on our way to being able to doing 100 by 100 translation, literally every language to every other language. So the scenario is you're in a restaurant where they don't speak the language, you take your phone, you take a picture of the menu, you have it translated, you then figure out what you want to order, and you have the phone translated to order it for you. Now this would be very useful for me. Right.
I would put helping resolve the situation in Haiti above,
yes,
that.
You need that
in terms
too.
of making the world a better place.
But my point is that each of these has the property that it's magic. It's something that you as an individual could not do yourself. It's something which society can really hold its head on, and it's something which really does allow us to be better humans, to help others and do the things that are great about being people.
Eric, did you want to challenge Joel's assertion that either whether we're talking about iPhone apps or Android apps or other people's apps won't be readily available in a fairly short time period?
Well, first place, I agree with everything that you're doing, and I think it's wonderful. Google has similar projects around search and other kinds of information using SMS. And so the statement, the problem that you made, I think is exactly correct. The only quibble I would have is it's not an either or. In fact, the people who have the cheapest and least capable phones are getting newer versions. And in fact, there's this huge growth of essentially very, very low cost, and there are various terms for them, but they have very primitive browsers. So they're one step above SMS. And with a primitive browser, we can do a lot more than you can do with SMS. Those of you who don't know what we're talking about, SMS is just the typing of characters in 160 characters. There is one company represented in this room that has made a huge impact using that rule, and that's Twitter. So if you want to know how did Twitter come up, well, one idea is that they used the principle of SMS, so they understood that extremely well.
And for those of you who can't see, the CEO of Twitter is sitting in the front row.
That's right.
Eric was gesturing to Evan Williams.
Yes, Evan is right here. But my point here is that every one of the groups gets a new phone next year. And everyone, whether it's the least cost or the most expensive cost, and that new phone, because we all participate in the improving cost dynamics, that new phone has a lot more magical capabilities than the one you currently have.
Before we move into discussion stage, Eric, I'd be remiss to not ask you a China question. It's related to...
Oh, I'm shocked.
Making the world a better place. So the question is, if for whatever reason Google were to not be involved in China in the future, would it then become impossible to achieve Google's mission because so much of the world's information, and indeed so much of the information, is in Chinese or in China? So I guess what I'm asking is it necessary to be there?
Well, of course, we debate this at great at length. As you all know, we were attacked. There were all sorts of other things we all announced. And we, after some deliberation, decided that we did not want to be part of the legally required censorship in China. That is not, it does not then follow that we want to not be in China, that we don't like. In fact, let me make it affirmatively. We love what the Chinese are doing as a growth, as a sort of country, if you will, in terms of growth and improving the state of lives of people and so forth and using information. We just don't like the censorship. And we said that very publicly. So what we hope is that will change. And we hope that we can apply some form of negotiation or pressure to get things to be better for the Chinese people.
Good, thank you. Didier, France also, like Germany, is trying to vastly improve its broadband capabilities. Can you talk about that a little bit? And is that the number one issue for you for France Telecom?
Well, I am impressed by all the statement which has been made, but nobody has really spoken about the networks. And in fact, in the miracle which has been described, you need to have efficient networks, which is the pillars of the new world. What is happening right now is something which is very impressive. We are really entering in what I call the global digital village, which means that you connect billions of customers worldwide, and you offer them the outstanding services which are provided by my colleagues, and they are really miracle, dreams or whatever. But at the beginning, you need to have efficient networks, which means that the quality of the interaction between the different communities on the matter like healthcare, e-administration or entertainment depends on the bandwidth of the networks you have installed. And we are entering in this year in a new world, because what has happened last year is that the bit rate, the bandwidth, which has been used on our networks in the main geography has been tripled. Usually, every year, we had a small growth of 10%. Last year, it was 3 times, which means that the game is really new. And so we will have to invest a lot in fiber, in a new generation of mobile, which will allow you to buy new terminals, of course, with a lot of new software. And this is a big step. It's not a continuity. And that's the reason why I think we are really entering in a new world, where applications like the one which has been described, we are working on healthcare. We consider that the quality of network is fundamental to help the citizen to live. In France, for example, every year we win 3 months of life, which means that the number of people which will live a long time and needs some help to live increase dramatically every year. So if you don't use the ICT system to help them, it will be at the end of the game you cannot solve the problem. It's very important. I would like to say something more about the number of internet subscribers. We have a little bit less than 2 billion subscribers worldwide, which means that we have really created the worldwide village. And of course, we are very happy of this huge number. But if you refer that to the population of the world, we have still missing 4 million people. And so one task of the telco like us, and I am sure that our colleagues are interested in the same target, is to connect more people with cheaper terminals, with easy access application. And it's one path which is very important, because if we want to realize what we can call our mission, which is to improve the life of all the citizens, we have to go this way. And the participation you, as customer, you make in our services, in all the connectivity, will help to accelerate this move, because obviously it makes pressure on the price of the equipment, on the terminals, it facilitates the thing, but we have to keep continuously this idea in our mind. We will not realize our mission if we don't connect everybody. And it's very important to realize all the dream which has been mentioned by my colleagues for everybody worldwide.
And I think it's a good opportunity to say we should focus for a bit on problems, on barriers. To achieve the things we're talking about, certain things need to be overcome. Let's start with government. So one of you is a regulator, and every one of you deals with regulators. Open to anyone, what is government doing well with regard to technology? What is government not doing well with regard to technology?
Well, I would just say I think one of the big challenges that we have today, and I think will be even bigger going forward, is the containment of personal data, privacy data, and governments, many governments' preference not to have it leave their borders. And that's a challenge for us to exploit the full power of some of the technology here without that.
You're saying the challenge is to make it so that governments are more willing to allow information to cross their borders?
Yes, in a protected fashion, certainly.
I think one of the main characteristics of the regulation system is that it has always been structured for the technology as it was 5 years before. And in the world we are living today, as mentioned a moment ago, there is an acceleration of the way we are delivering the signals, the services, and so on. And so the government, what I dream is that the government take care of these new systems, this new way to improve the quality of services as quickly as possible.
You're speaking specifically about telecommunications regulation in France.
Yes, but I think to speak about telecommunication regulation is already an old-fashioned way, because in fact we are all in the same boat, and all the sector of the ICT are connected together. We have a relationship between the content industry, the service industry, the network, and the equipment provider. And so I think as far as there is not a global view about everything, we will be a little bit slowed down in the access to this marvelous world I have in mind.
Eric?
You know, there's a precedent for this because the world went through this in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s with the development of railways. And the internet and broadband in particular is just as important. And I think it's important to sort of say right now that governments need to do everything possible to encourage the rapid adoption through private sector investment, private sector competition, innovation, et cetera, and removing regulatory barriers to the broad adoption of broadband. So I salute, for example, the German commitment to 50 megabit. There's a similar commitment, for example, in Finland. In the United States, in 2 weeks, there will be a national broadband plan unveiled, which I hope will have a similarly broad goal. It takes a lot to build these networks, as Didier pointed out, and these networks are central. Without the network, you don't have any connectivity. None of this stuff will start to work. The private sector will take care of everything else. But unless governments get organized around this as a strategic goal, the many sort of barriers, either incumbencies, laws, restrictions, scarcities, slow it down materially. The most successful 2 countries to do this, as I think are generally known, Korea, Singapore, and Japan, depending on exactly, maybe 3, all have used very, very heavy, strong state funding and state goals to do it, and they beat everybody else. And that's a competitiveness issue in terms of access. Literally, their trains are 10 times, 20 times faster. As a result, it's a problem.
Minister, I want to go to you. You've already stated you want to improve broadband in Germany, but would you talk a little bit about the tension between improving technology and private on the one hand, and privacy and security concerns on the other?
Yes, it's important to have a clear framework to encourage people to use it. You need a change in mentality to accept it. And that's the field of data security, to be provided that not all intelligence services get the information of private person, of states. If the computers are only one country, the danger is big. The SWIFT discussion, is it only intelligence service? It is stealing of knowledge. Priorities rights is an important thing to have secure that your new ideas gives you also money. The work you invested in it, can it be stolen? And that's a very open question. To have a clear framework, clear positions, a lot of discussions, a lot of ideas, a lot of dangers. And if the dream of our French colleague will be fulfilled, that everybody is part of this new global village, of digital village, we must give them a clear, solid position. And that's still an open question.
What's your answer to Mike Laphen, for example? I don't know if Germany is one country that you have in mind, but his point that countries need to get out of the way and let information go where it wants to go.
That's an open question. Well, of course, we want to let it go, but on the other hand, if we invest a lot of money to get some solutions, informations, you must have the chance to earn the money. Otherwise, you won't invest it. That's a dialogue we have to solve. I don't think we have already the complete solution.
Bill?
Well, I think that, technology is the means to the end, not the end in itself. And I think we could have, unfettered access, free form. The question is, are we going to have the political will and the personal courage to reinvent our delivery systems, where people have huge stakes in the game, right? Where we're so used to doing things the way we do them today. The technology is there or will be there. The regulatory thing, we make it an issue, right? It doesn't have to be as big a one as it is. But the real frontier, the real challenge in order for the technology to change how the world works and lives, which is what we're anchored in, is, are we prepared to reinvent the business models? Are we prepared to challenge the old norms? Are we prepared to dislocate people and jobs and roles and professions and all those things to raise our game? And that, I think, is another element of where government comes in. Now, smart grid technology, people seem to have embraced that pretty well. I mean, smart grids coming to a city near you. We're doing 42...
Just take a moment and explain what a smart grid is.
Well, smart grid, is sort of the next generation as we talk about sort of power. But how do you get reliability, efficiency, productivity, and sustainability wrapped into how we power our world? And we're doing the Smart Grid City in Boulder, Colorado. It's the first one in the U.S. We're doing Amsterdam, which is taking technology that exists today, or some pioneering, and connecting, from the source of power through the efficient use of power in the home, the office, what have you. Mm-hmm. So as part of that is a whole agenda around reducing the amount of power you need, but also the efficient delivery of what you need to where you need it. And that seems to be one that governments get, people understand. It's good for productivity. You get other things like analytics, and I don't mean our garden variety analytics, I mean the predictive analytics technology that's out there today, that gives you a lot of answers. It looks around corners for you and gives you some answers. You might not like the answers. You might not like, if you're a financial services company, the answer your predictive analytics gave you about what the next 90 days were going to look like. And that's about the will and resolve to embrace what the technology can provide and change how you do things.
So I want to throw this open to the audience. Ask anything you like. I'll two things that we haven't talked about on the panel at all yet. One, Bill was hinting at, is what role technology played in the financial crisis of the past year and a half or so, and what role it might play coming out of it. We've talked very little about social networking, Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, which is a perfect example of existing technologies that have been used to, make the world a better place. But let's hear what you want to talk about. And I think there's a microphone. We'll start right there. Please tell us who you are, George.
George Colony, Forrester Research. We talked about if there was one technology that you could make ubiquitous to improve society, what would it be?
Other than broadband, Yeah. Anybody? Joe?
I think it's the one that's becoming ubiquitous, which is the mobile phone.
Sorry.
It's transforming everything.
I think the easiest answer is that if you can't communicate digitally, you're not in the game.
Right.
Didier mentioned this. Other people have mentioned this. So the technology that's needed is communication for literally every single person on the planet. Imagine if those 4 billion people whose voices we have not heard in languages that we don't speak showed up in our conversation. Be pretty interesting.
I think we have to understand that the borders we have in mind between the fixed networks, the mobile, the classification we had in mind in the past is over. Because in fact, the capacity we have on the mobile is growing so fast, and the future product we will have next year in our pocket are so powerful that you will get the same information on your mobile as the one you have on your screen at home and on all your screen. So at the end, ubiquity will be a basic data of your interface with all the networks all together, and the separation doesn't exist anymore. And I think it's very useful to have the mobile as an engine to force everybody to go in the same direction. And it's very powerful, in fact, also to improve the regulation aspect. Because in fact, as all these devices are without any border, in fact, when you have a concept which is developed somewhere, in the United States or in Asia, whatever, when you come in Europe, whatever is the regulation, it works. And so the people has to follow that and to adapt to the reality. So we are really entering a world where you cannot think with the old-fashioned system. You have to be modern with ubiquity terminals, with modern services which are worldwide.
Right there, please, in the black. Yes.
My question goes to...
I'm sorry, please identify yourself.
Oh, yeah. I come from China. I'm the entrepreneur. My question goes to Eric Smith. Because so many Chinese people eager to know what's the answer about does Google want to stay in China or not? And with what kind of circumstances Google will stay? Thank you.
Well, again, I'd prefer not to have a China conversation in a panel that's not about China. We would very much like to stay in China. We would very much like the censorship, which we oppose, to not be true in China.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Ori Okolo, and I'm the executive director and co-founder of a crowdsourcing platform that was developed in Africa called Ushahidi. And that's, I think, been in the news lately about our crisis response in Haiti and in other crisis situations. I think my concern, not necessarily whether it's a question, if you look at the, what the panel has been framed as, addressing complex problems, you're missing what I see as innovations at the edge. And I'm wondering how all of you in the panel are engaging in what we're seeing with Ushahidi and other developments. Because we work in challenging environments, we have actually moved forward and come up with a lot more innovation, and it doesn't seem to be reflected here in the conversation about, like I get concerned when I hear about develop for SMS and not for smartphones. Why do you want to restrict those people just to SMS? How about developing cheaper or making SMSs, like a smartphone Lite? I know Nokia is working at $100 smartphone, for instance, which I think could be accessible to most people.
Joel, why don't you address that?
Sure. I certainly don't mean to say that I think anybody should be limited to not using a smartphone. I think people should buy whatever phone they can afford and that they want. I think the point is that let's say it takes 3 years before those health workers I mentioned in, let's say, Kenya or Zambia to have a smartphone or a phone that can run, apps as we know them. In those 3 years, there are going to be kids that show up with their parents at clinics. And those clinics won't have drugs. And the reason those clinics won't have drugs is because they don't have a stock management system. A stock management system could be built and implemented, I don't know, by many of the people who are sitting in this room. Probably would take them a few months to come around with something that was accessible from the web, accessible by SMS, et cetera, that wouldn't presume that you had a particular platform that would be accessible by all of them. The difference between deciding to build that system now that is accessible by SMS and all those things is the difference between hundreds of thousands of kids that don't get treated for malaria and other diseases because we said, well, let's just give it a couple years and then we can develop on an easier platform.
I guess my point is some of those innovations are happening in those countries, and maybe if there was time invested by Google and other companies to look at what people are doing on the edge, for instance, OpenStreetMap has actually outdone what Google did in Haiti in terms of location-based mapping. And I guess being more willing to engage with developers perhaps in Africa who are closer to the situation than people in Silicon Valley who maybe are looking for a business.
Well, thank you. We have a lot of questions. I want to try to get some geographic...
Can I just actually respond
of
to
course.
that for a second? So you may not be aware that Google and your team is actually working together today, and I just approved the joint team. It's already in Haiti, so I actually know that it's happening. And I think you're creating a false dichotomy. We need to do all of this as quickly as possible. In fact, the most innovative parts of Silicon Valley are precisely at the edge, and they're at the nexus of local information, social information, and GPS information. So there are many, many reasons to think that this is going to be solved very, very quickly, and it will be done at very inexpensive smartphones running Android and the other cheap operating systems, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to happen.
Adam, if I could just point out briefly for the young lady that our software is developed in Nairobi, Kenya by our Kenyan staff. So it's not a Silicon Valley product.
Over there, yes, please.
Hi, my name is Marcos Wironi. I'm from Argentina. And we talked about government and about, let's say, cheap applications and technologies that will help us make what we do today better and more efficient. But I guess what I wanted to see, what the comment from the panel was how does technology affect human behavior and human interaction? And by that, I don't mean necessarily the obvious references to Facebook and other social networks, but I mean, what does spending 12, maybe more hours in the computer, how does that affect the human interaction?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Who wants to grab that?
Eric?
Well, I feel like we're discussing the arrival of color television and rock and roll in the 1960s. The fact of the matter is, I think people choose how they want to spend their time. There have been recent articles that essentially say that children today, if they're not in school and not asleep, are online on some form of digital, mobile, or computing or gaming device. So we have no idea what the long-term things. I will tell you, since Google hires a lot of young people, I think the young people now are much more impressive than my generation was. So I think the aggregate output is better. So without commenting, there's a lot of evidence, for example, that teenage gaming, which most of us think is sort of crazy because it wasn't invented when we were young, in fact improves strategic reasoning, navigational reasoning, and it obviously improves hand-eye coordination. So there are lots of reasons to think that technology has a positive effect. The one that I do worry about is the question of deep reading. As the world moves to this instantaneous device that literally is your online helper, it remembers everything, it knows where you are, it knows where you're going, knows where friends are, it's your communications device, it's your Wikipedia, et cetera, it's all right there. you're going to fundamentally spend less time reading long-form literature of one kind or another, books, magazines, and so forth. And that probably has an effect on cognition. It probably has an effect on reading, and no one knows what that does.
You know, maybe this has already happened, and I'm ignorant of it, but I would submit this would be a good subject for a future WEF panel. This is a big topic. Who else? I want to come to this side of the room now. Okay.
Ashok Aram, Abraj Capital, United Arab Emirates. 3 questions. Why has mobile banking not been more effective in the G7 countries, given the improvement in mobile networks? Why hasn't that happened? Question number 1. Why hasn't that behavior changed in delivery system? Question number 2, broadest access to broadband. We have seen the explosion of mobile telephony completely change the dynamics in the world between the fixed line world 20 years ago, when there was a big, deep divide, and the mobile world where there's tremendous convergence. So broadest access to broadband, how do we maintain that as we go forward? And in that context, and I think Eric alluded to that.
If you're going to ask 3, it's got to be quick.
Yeah. What does that mean in terms of volatility in decision making?
Well, let me start with the first one, and then you guys can help yourself to 1, 2, and 3. I think mobile banking is right around the corner. I mean, I think it took a little pause, but the pioneering's been done. The proof points are out there, the capabilities there. People have dealt with the security and reliability and the things that were needed about that. And I think the stuff is there waiting to happen, right? And it's one of those, who's going to go first, and then why does everyone else have to follow them in a herd? But maybe where I see more of the pioneering is in the emerging markets, where they don't have the legacy to deal with. They can start fresh. And I think there is where we're going to see. If you think about looking at the banking business model in China, right? I mean, you can't do it any other way. And it's true with digital marketing, it's true with banking, and it's true with all these forms of delivery system. And I think we're right around the corner from that.
On the question of volatility, I think volatility clearly increases as a result of interconnectedness. There will be more large, greater bubbles in the future, independent of what we do to address the previous ones. There'll be more falsehoods, more lies, more scandals, and all of that. Because we're more interconnected, we're still human, we still have the failings and things. Hopefully, as a society, we will recognize that the communication does not fundamentally change the behavior, and that we have a responsibility to use it to make the world a better place. But I don't think that technology makes the world either safer or more predictable. It can make it more unsafe, and certainly makes it more unpredictable, because you have more independent actors.
Yes, please. Sorry, just wait for the microphone.
Just sort of to the comment that...
I'm sorry, please tell everybody.
Barry Gossin, CEO of Newmark Knight Frank. We're a real estate firm. There have been many actors in the real estate meltdown. I haven't heard that technology was one. In fact, I think technology could be an incredible actor in terms of changing behavior, because with additional knowledge, the market could have achieved more efficiency. If technology were used to explain to people what an adjustable rate mortgage was, or what kind of predatory lending was out there, that some of the pitfalls and some of the problems we would have got to could have been avoided. So, yeah. So the question is, does anyone see taking that an effort towards trying to educate people to avoid those kind of future bubbles?
One quick comment. I disagree, Barry, with your premise. I think technology was the center of the real estate bubble, because technology was used to create the derivatives that created the excess money that allowed for the monetization. It was not in your shop, but it was on the other shop. But the formulas were technology-based, because the computers could actually calculate these things at a level that humans could not normally do.
No, I think that's exactly right. So you can get yourself in trouble at the speed of light. The question is, though, I mean, if you think about what you said there, right, it's about human behavior, right? It's about what do you do with the information you have. And the thing that's true is we have the information today to see around corners, right, with predictive analytics and really fairly straightforward things. The question is, how do we embrace acting on it? How do we incent people to do the right thing, to make the right choices, and have the right balance of risk and return? And that's the human question. At the end of the day, all this technology stuff has tremendous potential, but we have to get the business models and the people agenda aligned with it in order to get it to harvest.
Just so we're all clear, I mean, isn't this progress? I mean, the toothpaste is out of the tube on this sort of thing, right? Right, Eric?
But you have to establish a principle. I think Barry's right. How do we go forward given all this stuff that happened? I think the principle is transparency. That if the information were more generally available, people could have anticipated what was happening, could have made better business decisions, and ultimately had less of an impact that was so horrific. And the bind we're in is largely because these markets were not transparent, and the tools were not used in a way that was open and broadly understood.
I want to go to the back of the room. Your microphone's coming, Congressman Markey. There you go.
I'm Congressman Markey from the United States. So there is really a Dickensian quality to this revolution. It's the best of wires and the worst of wires simultaneously. It can enable and ennoble, or it can degrade and debase, depending upon whether it's in the hands of financial, quantitative, mathematical geniuses over here, who then have people who misrepresent what those algorithms mean, and the financial press goes along with it. Or you can have Google in Haiti, or Joel in Africa, working with these technologies to improve them. So, to a certain extent, when I think about this, there's a real revolution that took place. First of all, 12 years ago, there's no Google. 12 years later, we're saying to ourselves, Google versus China, finally a fair fight. Huh? And it just happened in 12 years. Huh? An incredible global discussion that was not possible before the broadband and digital revolution. So I would like, if you could, just to expand a little bit on how the tech revolution in the 90s made it possible for us to now think in terms of an energy and climate revolution now, because the smart grid is really just an electricity internet. Mm-hmm. It's just a broadband information capacity that allows us to bring in the wind and solar off of the ocean or the prairies or the desert, and it gives power to people at home as well, or businesses to be able to manage their energy, and to do so using information technologies. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because there's a lot of recombinant technological DNA here that's possible, that this revolution makes a lot of other revolutions possible, and you've been talking about some of them.
But I regret to tell you we have 30 seconds to deal with that interesting question. So either someone would like to answer in 30 questions, or we can conclude.
Well, I guess I would just say to your question, Congressman, with the smart grid, in an area that you're quite expert in broadly, the climate agenda, business, people at large, and technology all came together and got on the same page. And if we can do that in some of these other areas, then we're on to something.
Gentlemen, thank you for sharing your time with us, and thank you to this very attentive audience. Thank you.
Enjoying Davos?